know there's no real quick, simple answer, because obviously there's a lot of nutrients that we need to know about, and everyone has a different type of diet, even whether you're vegan or vegan. And I will be aiming this at people that have plant-based vegan diets. Then, depending on what you're eating and how much and that sort of thing. Yep. So what I was going to do is just, I've developed this thing that will make it easier for people to know whether they need something or not. So pretend this is a PowerPoint presentation. And this is a fridge magnet, right? And it goes through, if you look down the edge, we start vitamin A, folate, blah, blah. So it goes down vitamins, then protein, carbohydrates, fats, fibre, trace elements, and then minerals, okay? So basically, these are what we call essential nutrients that we need to get one way or another, inject, or whatever we need to do, or from food, or whatever. Yeah. So some of those will very easily get from a plant-based diet, and others we need to pay more attention to. So how about I just focus on the ones we might need to pay more attention to? Yep. Okay. So we start with vitamin A. Don't worry about it, right? Because it's in red and orange and yellow fruit and veggies. Everyone eat those? Folate, green veggies, stuff like that. It's all good. It's recommended if you're planning to get pregnant, then supplement with folate. Okay? I'm not going to talk about that. We're just condensing half our talk into a 3-minute talk. No, I won't do that quick. Vitamin B12. Okay, now that's part of the B group vitamins, and we need to get that from somewhere. Okay? Now, it's found in animal products, but obviously if you don't get animal products, you're going to have to find it from somewhere else, right? Contrary to popular belief, you will not rely on to get it from mushrooms or tempeh or these type of fermented foods. Many years ago, that's what we thought, right? But that's been found to be incorrect. These are actually analogues that can help cause issues, okay? The vitamin B12 is something very important. You can get it from what we call fortified foods, and that means it's had vitamin B12 added. Now, I bought this to show I'm not pushing any brand, in fact it's like a no name, But soy milk is an example. Some have added vitamin B12, some don't. Okay, so if you're looking to soy milk for vitamin B12, you need to check the label and see, right? Marmite has got added vitamin B12. Did you have a question?
Is any of the B12 supplementation going to be derived from animal?
Unlikely. But they could have animal products in formulation, like lactose is commonly used as a filler in vitamins and stuff like that, so you need to be careful with that. So a lot of meat analogues like beef sausages and stuff have B12 added. So it's not naturally there, it's added, you need to check the label, okay? No. You might read that sometimes because you're reading American literature, like if you read stuff that PCRM put out, it will say breakfast cereals, illegal in Australia to add vitamin B12 to a breakfast cereal. There's none in any breakfast cereals in Australia. So be very careful when you read your information. In England, I believe they have vitamin B12 in some margarines. Once again, it's not allowed to be added to margarines in Australia. So just be really careful. Because it's just the food laws, and if it was never going to be in the first place, we can't put it in.
Question about beef. Why is it illegal in Australia?
It's just in the food standards. It's not like you're going to get arrested or something. It just means that in here, the fortification is, let's say, breakfast cereals. There was never B12. We're only in breakfast cereals in Australia supposedly adding stuff in that was there in the first place that we took out by refining it, right? B12 was never in the cereals in the first place, right? Whereas in America they have different legislation, and they allow B12 to add it to the Nutrigram, for example. Right? So just be very careful to read information and where it comes from, okay? Because unfortunately there's a lot of American and British stuff that's correct for that country, it's not correct for Australia as far as fortification goes. So you need to have, for B12, they recommend 3 serves of fortified foods a day. Now, I personally would find that extremely onerous to try and do that. Because I don't really want to eat that much processed food. It's like, oh, I'll make sausage or something. So I would actually say the easiest way would be to supplement with a tablet or B12, which could be in the form of a multivitamin, right? It's recommended if you're going to use a multi, have at least 100 micrograms of B12 in the multi, and that's because the absorption is a lot lower in a multi, okay? Whereas if it's in the actual recommended amount is only a few micrograms a day, so you might think, oh, you're overdosing. Don't worry, you can't overdose on it, so that's not an issue. You only absorb a very small amount every time you have it anyway. So what you could have is, as an alternative multi, just a B12 supplement, and as you pointed out, they're not all vegan, so make sure you get one if you want one to be vegan. Tastes pretty good, yeah, I just chew them up, that's right. You could have a multivitamin, or you could have a B12, probably if you just took a pure B12 tablet, say 10 to 20 micrograms a day would be fine. Or if you want to have a high dose once a week, you go 2,000, which would be like 2 of these tablets. So because these are 1,000 micrograms, it is a high dose, you can just cut one into 4 and have that each day, or have 2 a week at once, right? Because when you take a massive dose, it does all in, and you've got problems with your water absorption, absorbed by passive. Okay? So that's B12, so very, very important. Deficiency can cause a whole range of problems, from problems with your blood cells, more importantly, problems with your nervous system, depression, dementia, maybe to insanity, okay? And it can be irreversible if it goes too far, especially in children. It can cause brain abnormalities and stuff like that. So really something to avoid. Okay, but it's very easy to avoid it. Other B vitamins you'll get from your whole grains and different veggies and that, so not something you need to worry about. Vitamin C, we all know we get that from fresh fruit and veggies. You should be eating those every day. If you're not, your diet's a problem for a start. You're looking up that poor Julie. Vitamin D, now this is the sunshine vitamin, you've all heard of that, right? It's really not commonly found in many foods at all. It's found in cod liver oil, obviously that's not legal to have, right? Most people get enough, or was thought that, until we started getting a bit too over-sophisticated, from the sun. Natural exposure to the sun. Doesn't have to be lie out there all day and fry. Just a little bit of sun, say 15 to 20 minutes a day of gentle sunlight, right, without sunscreen. See where we've gone a little bit wrong there. Now in Australia, constantly people are coming to me saying, my doctor's done a vitamin D because I've got B12 deficiency. Would you believe in Australia, one of the sunniest places in the world, right? We become very fearful of the sunshine. So if we're not going to get it from the sun, we can get it from fortified margarines, Australian margarines, table margarines with vitamin D added, right? I personally don't touch margarine, I like to get it from the sun. The other option is it would be in most multivitamins. Okay? But some people become so deficient their doctor recommends quite high doses of vitamin D. And there's 2 types, forms of vitamin D, D2 and D3, and only D2 is vegan. That can be quite difficult to find. Okay? But really, I'm not trying to push that. Vitamin E, you'll get that from different veggies and nuts and things like that. Usually not something you have to worry about. Vitamin K, green vegetables, we should be eating those every day. Protein. Now, in the normal circumstances, you will get enough proteins in all your different plant foods, from your legumes and your nuts and seeds and your grains and even your vegetables, right? So virtually all whole foods have some protein. If you eat enough calories, whatever, you should get enough protein. Okay, unless you're eating a whole lot of empty calories, junk food, like drinking lots of soft drink, eating lots of fatty food because there's no protein in the fried, oils. So we don't normally need to supplement with protein, unless of course, I don't know what I'm giving you, what's his name, but you're really trying to, do a lot of heavy exercise and build up muscle, then people often do, right? But the normal person that's not a bodybuilder or a weightlifter or something, they should be able to easily get enough protein from their diet. Carbohydrates, well, that's in things like potatoes, bananas, rice, pasta, all those good things, grains, good food to have. Don't be afraid of carbohydrates, but certainly I never heard of anyone having a deficiency unless they're on Atkins. Fats. Now with fats, there's, good fats, bad fats, all very confusing. All fats are fattening, just be aware of that, okay? We don't need to add a whole lot of refined fats to our diet. You can get plenty of fat just from the foods that we eat, so don't think that you need to sort of pour a bit of oil on everything just to get some fat or something. But the ones we need, I've got a few props. ALA is an important one, and that is found in most oils, but not in very big amounts. But it's very in flax seeds, flaxseed oil. You probably ordered that. Very rich. Okay, good stuff to have. Okay, you only need about a teaspoon of the oil. You can have too much of a good thing, or 2 or 3 teaspoons of the seeds, and you need to grind them up. And the best to grind them up freshly. So, good thing to have. Now, hopefully our body converts some of this ALA to what we call DHA, which is the type of omega-3 that people get from the fish and why fish gets pushed so much. But where do fish get their DHA from? Anybody want to guess? Yes. Okay, good. Yeah. So, better to get it direct from the source, you don't need to get the second-hand source. If you want, you can now get vegan DHA.
Is that really recent in Australia, or is it available in Australia, or do you have to order it?
Yeah, it's available, or you can buy it online. Look, it's been around for a while, but you know how things take a while to filter through, because most Australians are eating fish to get their DHA, and no one cares about all the little old vegans and vegetarians, so yeah. It's now recommended that pregnant women take DHA. Okay, so pregnant women are meant to eat a lot of fish because of mercury and stuff and other nasty things. So eating meat and you'll find if you need a supermarket with yogurts and that, not that you're probably buying toddler dairy yogurt, but it's got added DHA, which they're getting from fish, usually, right? But this is the algal source, the vegan source, okay? So I take one of those every day. These aren't things that you're going to feel sick if you don't take it or something. It's not like that. The trouble with deficiency is, you often, it's quite hard to measure when you don't know until it's too late, or you're just not as healthy as you would be otherwise, So it's really sort of, how can I put it, people say, I took a vitamin yesterday, I don't feel any different. Well, it doesn't really work like that. So don't think, oh gee, I took a vitamin for a week, it's very different, it's not worth having, right? I've had people come to me and say, they started taking multivitamin and now they have the energy to exercise, which for years they didn't, and stuff like that. And I certainly know, for years I said, don't need vitamins, so stupid. And now I really like to take a multivitamin every day. I do feel that it makes a difference. So, and the reason it makes a difference, right, is it's not because my diet's rubbish, it's because our soil is rubbish, okay? And every time they reprint the analysis of the nutrients in food, how they dissolve and they do they analyse samples of, they usually use 3 samples from different places. They might get 3 different oranges from different places, put them in and work out how much vitamin C and how much iron and this and that. It seems to be less every time. They might do it every 5-10 years. It's going down because our soils are rubbish. So our soils are getting depleted of certain nutrients. Our farming methods are just get it out quick, get it into the supermarket or whatever, so there's no thought about getting nutrition. So it's not, our diets are getting worse, but actually our diets are partly getting worse just because even if we eat the same food, we're getting less nutrients than we did 10 years ago. It's a bit scary, right? So anyway, that was fats. Fibre, well, you should get plenty of that in whole plant foods because it's in all your grains and fruit and vegetables and stuff. So if you've got a fibre deficiency, you've got a bad diet. Trace elements, probably one that you might want to know about is selenium, which is getting deficient in some parts of Australia in the soils. But something that's very rich in selenium is Brazil nuts. Okay? You don't need to eat a lot. One a day is heaps. In fact, it's more than you need, right? But when I get up in the morning while I'm waiting for the kettle to boil, I have one Brazil nut. They're very nice. It takes self-control to make one. But they're a good source of selenium, which is good benefits too. So once again, I'm not saying don't do that you'll get deficient. But when you look at the analysis, the amount of selenium and stuff, when you measure that, which used to be said to be they're good sources, there's a lot of zeros. Just none came up in the most recent analysis of broccoli and different stuff. Magnesium, generally you get plenty of that from just different whole grains and beans and stuff like that. Iodine, now that's one that's deficient in soils in a lot of Australia. So if you're not eating seafoods, it could be that you're not really going to get iodine. But iodine is in sea vegetables like seaweeds, okay? So they are a very good source of iodine. But you can have too much of a good thing, okay? Too much iodine can cause your thyroid to not function properly, okay? So you might have heard a case with a bonsai soy milk that is putting kelp in there and people are actually getting too much iodine. So don't start buying kelp and having a whole lot of kelp because you'll probably get way too much iodine. It's actually not really recommended anymore that you use kelp as a source of iodine. Unless you're very, very strict about only having a little bit, If if you have seaweed a couple of times a week, like it might be a nori roll or something, that would give you a little dose of iodine. Okay. The other thing is if you use salt, you could use iodized salt, which has got iodine in it. Okay. But I'm not saying that you should start adding salt to everything you eat. But I know I've got like really low blood pressure, and when I cook potato, I'll put a little bit of iodized salt rather than just not have iodized salt. So that's the source of iodine. Okay. It also says on here, and I wrote this, so it should be right, green beans and spinach. But once again, it's variables depending on the soil. It's not really a lot in there. So when I've sort of done analyses, most of the research I've done has just been on this sort of stuff and nutrient adequacy, how to get the nutrients that you need. That it looks like that, people in Australia could be struggling to get enough iodine, and now it's actually getting added to certain foods, fortified, because they've realised Australian soils are deficient in iodine, and the population as a whole is, probably a bit borderline with iodine. So don't think it's a vegan thing necessarily. It's not. Zinc. Now, if you have a good plant-based diet with lots of legumes and whole grains and that, you should get enough zinc. And the same applies to iron, green vegetables, cereals, legumes, that sort of thing, good sources of iron. So in most cases there wouldn't be a great need to supplement with iron, or there shouldn't be. And supplementing with iron isn't really recommended, especially for men, unless you know that you need it. Because once again, too much iron can be harmful. Okay? So don't just be willy-nilly just because your doctor or someone said, oh, you're a vegetarian, what about your iron? Because everyone will say that to you. Start taking iron, okay? Get a test and see if you actually need it, right? Because too much iron has an oxidising effect throughout the body, and it's being connected to things like heart disease and stuff like that. It could actually increase your chance of heart disease, okay? And that's one of the theories why women have less heart disease than men prior to menopause, is because they have less hormone in their bodies. So, just be careful, right? Now, calcium's a tricky one because, we say, oh, well, meat leaches the calcium from your bones and all that. And look, there's a certain amount of truth that the more animal protein you have, the more calcium you lose in your urine. That has been found, right? But calcium is something where, once again, it's not like it's a deficiency, as in, it takes a month and suddenly you're unwell or something. It's more like if you don't have enough calcium when you're growing, you'll probably be shorter, but that might be okay. If it's when you're a teenager and you're growing rapidly, your bones won't be as strong, like you're sort of not as dense. And then as we age and whatever, then we start to lose more calcium from our bones. If we started with not real great bones in the first place, then losing more calcium, which is inevitable, especially for women, but for all of us as we age, then we're going to have probably not great bones, right? So it's mostly about our bones. But calcium isn't the whole story with bones. Exercise is really, really important, right? If you just lie in bed all day, it doesn't matter how much calcium you took in, your bones would be rubbish, okay? And you need vitamin D. It's very, very important to absorb the calcium. That's another important thing about vitamin D, right? So with calcium, to supplement or not to supplement, I don't know. You could sort of think, well, am I exercising? Am I getting enough sunshine? And then think about calcium. Am I having any fortified foods, which means there's calcium added, like some things like this. Some soy milk has added calcium, some orange juice has added calcium. And then, are you eating a lot of green vegetables? Chinese vegetables are good sources of calcium. Broccoli is a moderate source, And then, do you think that the recommended amount is what we really need? Well, it's the recommended amount for sedentary, westernised people, which we are, right? So people that, like in Africa, and women that carry big pots on their head and everything, they have a much lower calcium intake and they have a lower incidence of osteoporosis, but they're really doing a lot of weight-bearing exercise every day with their bones. So, exercise is probably a bigger part of the picture, I think, a bigger piece of the puzzle than calcium itself is. Just, as I said, if you're not doing enough exercise, no matter how much calcium you put in, it's like if you break your arm, you put it in a cast, you're not using it, what will happen to your arm? It will just shrink. Well, your bones actually do the same thing. If you're not putting pressure on them, they're not going to stay strong. So we've been all the way around, so that was really quick. And basically the other way you use this is, so vegans sort of look at your own personal situation and decide whether or not you need to supplement and if what. So the things I would suggest is supplement with vitamin B12. This is just my suggestion, you might analyse, but I'd say definitely that one. Iodine, vitamin D if you're one of these gothic type people, because I'm going to say, did I look at you? So, yeah. And omega-3 fatty acids in the form of flaxseed, linseed, and possibly DHA. Okay. But this is, you've probably all got it before, plant food groups, that's legumes, nuts, seeds, fruit, vegetables, whole grains. I realise a lot of people don't even know what those things are. You know, these are legumes, they look like beans and peas and lentils. Yep. Angela? You're late. And what was the other thing? Oh, whole grains. That's actually popcorn. That is a whole grain. So you can popcorn, which I often do, and that's a whole grain that you eat. And brown rice, it's a whole grain. White rice isn't the whole grain, they've taken off a bit, and that's why it's not in here. Right? So, and obviously wholemeal bread, things made from whole grains like wholemeal bread, wheat bix, that sort of thing there. Whole grains. Okay. So you really should be eating them every day, and legumes every day, and fresh fruit, and fresh vegetables. But then you're still making something. Yes?
Yeah, I'm going to the topic of fats.
Yes.
Now, I work as a gardener,
Mm-hmm.
physical,
Mm-hmm.
and secondly, I'm a fitness training fanatic.
Yep, yep.
So I'm really
You probably need some fat.
giving my joints really, you know, I go out and play 2-hour tennis matches,
Mm-hmm.
go running for 20 minutes every second day. So I'm really giving my joints by age 60 probably. Something like myself, should I have some substantially greater intake of fats than a person who didn't do it?
No, I don't think it's going to really do much for your joints with class. I don't think you're going to eat fat and then it somehow goes into the joint and lubricates it or something weird like that. But the reason you might well need a higher fat intake is to get your calorie intake high enough, because you're certainly not someone who's got an overweight problem looking at you, right? Yeah, okay. So you might find you struggle to get enough calories with the amount of exercise you do if you ate a low-fat diet with lots of all the good stuff, fruit and veggies and all that. And you find that with children sometimes too, they're eating what appears like a really healthy diet, but they're actually very underweight. And that in that situation, it's just because their appetite can't get enough in, right? The amount of fibre and what fills them up too much, and so they can benefit from having high-fat foods. But we're not talking about just deep frying everything you eat, more like having some avocado, some nuts, some seeds, and what we call the healthy fats, right? But if you're someone like me, now I found a photo of myself yesterday and he died when I was 18, right? I was there with my husband, right? I was fat, right? And, you know, because I come from a family of obese people, right? So this one nut, it's taken me years to get to the point where I exercise enough that I can have one nut, you know, and not like put on weight. You know what I mean? Like, so everyone's different. So if you're someone that has a tendency to put on weight, then you don't want to be dipping into the nuts and the avocado and stuff, right? But if you're someone that, like you, that is a naturally slim person that exercises a fair bit, you might find you get too skinny if you don't eat some high-fat food. So it's very individual, the amount of fat. But I don't think it's going to actually help your joints to eat more fat necessarily.
Sorry, I was wondering about like flora, is it in your gut and like bacteria and stuff, like having more good bacteria? I don't have any sources of yogurt or many sources of fermented foods besides kombucha and some tempeh at the moment. I'm just wondering if that's likely to be a problem or
No, I
not.
think it would be a problem. No, I don't think that you need to eat any fermented foods necessarily. I think that, yes, people take antibiotics and it's often recommended that because the antibiotics have killed off all the bacteria, good and bad, right, and made your gut virtually sterile. It will naturally start to build up the levels, but sometimes it's recommended, I have some fermented food to help build them up or whatever. But no, I think if you eat a healthy diet and you're not on antibiotics long term or anything, then you don't need to worry about fermented foods. That's my opinion. So, yeah. Yes.
Where does zinc naturally occur?
Zinc,
Yeah.
whole grains, legumes, nuts, green vegetables, pretty much as the similar places to where you find iron. Yeah, so if you've got, that's another reason with supplementation just to be a little bit careful, right? Because the minerals tend to compete with each other. So if you take calcium as recommended, then you take it at night, at bedtime, not with food, okay? Because calcium is a very big, what we call positive anion, you know, Ca double plus, not study chemistry, you know, but it competes effectively with iron and zinc. So if you have a big dose of calcium with something with iron in it, what will tend to happen is that you won't absorb much of the iron, you'll absorb more of the calcium, right? Because they use similar absorption paths. So, you know, that's why if you're going to supplement with individual things, just be a little bit careful. So it's better if you can to get stuff from food rather than just go, oh, I'll take some zinc, I'll take some iron, I'll take some calcium. Like, that's really not a good plan to randomly supplement. Does that make sense?
Just aware of the time.
Yeah, we can go.
We'll have to pack up. But perhaps, you know, if you've got a burning question, they might go and address it outside.
Let's have the one last one, then that's it.
Okay.
No?
I was just going to say,
Well,
you were saying that avocado and nuts might make people put on a bit more weight because they're fatty foods. In a vegan diet, apart from exercise, what are the good vegan foods to be eating to stay slimmer as opposed to the more fatty ones?
Vegetables, legumes, forget the nuts and seeds, whole grains, fruit.
Okay.
Yeah. So the high fibre, low fat food that's going to fill you up, you can still eat a big plate of food, right? And try and make at least half your plate vegetables or salad. You're happy to, you know, or if it's breakfast, you want to have half the plate of fruit, you know.
So sometimes feel like rice and potato and pasta. Like
They're
these
fine,
things
they're fine. They're fine next week then. They give you energy for your muscles, they give you fuel, you need that. And if you don't eat foods like that, they're like carbohydrate, half an hour to an hour after a meal, you're going to be hungry again and go and eat some chocolate bar. So don't be afraid of eating those foods. Like, it's fat that tends to make people fat. Okay. I don't think there's too many people that are overweight from eating too many whole grains, like too much brown rice. But yeah, if you start eating a whole lot of stuff made from white flour and stuff, yeah, that's not a good thing to do at all. Because it will tend to have a similar effect to having too much sugar is you feel hungry an hour later. If you have a quick rise in blood glucose, your pancreas is overreacted, so you have too much insulin, and your blood sugar's gone low again, and you go, I feel like eating again, what's going on here, you know? So the good thing about those whole grain foods and vegetables and legumes tend to what we call low GI, which don't get too caught up in that. That basically, that'll help you stay full for longer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.